Chapter 1. Overlooking down at the city tonight from within inside of the Space Needle. Staring at the people down below, catching the breeze one last time before security calls out last call. From looking down from the observation deck. It is a hot August night tonight. The album from where the term Hot August Night came from was not such a bad album either. Having that record to own, I did in 1972. From today's music history, that record. That music era in which it had come from came from a time in the 1970s when they called this time, this music, the singers and songwriting era. The great Neil Diamond from that time was the ultimate singer and songwriter for me back then in 1972. Catching the Hot August tour on day 3 at the Greek Theater in the city of Los Angeles. I had missed the opening act, for the sun that day was taking forever to set. Hiding in a motel, listening to the radio guy said that the sun would set around 6 or so. Not able to take that chance with the fear of being burned, the sun did not set until around 7 or so. Not being mad about missing the opening act to seeing Neil Diamond in concert. But years later, when I looked at some of the things on the internet, I saw that this band called Three Dog Night was his opening act that night. If I'd been able to see that opening act of the show. Bummer, saying this to myself years later. This was the price I paid for. The price for living in the shadows. The price of hiding away from the sun. To always be waiting for that sunset to hit each night so I can go outside and start my day while the rest of the world was coming to an end from these days. 1972. The year I had gone to this concert would be the same year that I had visited the city of Seattle, becoming a future place that I would be calling home soon. A song entitled The Bluest Skies Are in Seattle, sung by a man named Bobby Sherman, had people coming to this city, often allowing them to see with their eyes the beautiful scenery provided by Seattle, showing interest from the Bobby Sherman song. Some years before 1972, before the Bobby Sherman song, a great 1950s singer who invented rock and roll, as they say, was in Seattle for the World's Fair in 1962. The year that the Space Needle, which I was inside of right now, had been built to showcase that World's Fair in '62. Not getting much sleep lately. The reason? The theater business can be a thing keeping you up when trying to run the business from all sorts of angles. Keeping the tourists excited to come and spend their money to see the shows that you put before an audience each night. 6 days a week. Changing shows every few months, making that your audience does not get bored by seeing the same plays over and over. Not complaining, by any means, of course. I loved my theater. Loved how the city's patrons come to the theater each week. Always excited to see what plays my theater was to put on. The theater business was my way of being a part of the world. Closest thing to ever feeling normal as a human. Seeing the theater in 1976, coming across the big building while on a normal nightly walk, the theater was attached to housing apartments above it. The theater had been shut down for almost 40 years when investigating this at the library records. The curator, some guy named Vance, told me that the theater was very popular during the vaudeville days, pre-World War II. The previous owners had lost this theater due to financial circumstances, the curator had said. Chapter 2. Walking inside for the first time, seeing that those 2,000 seats, guessing probably that was the main reason for the theater closing, being hard to fill the 2,000 seats each night in those years had to be hard. The curator, explaining to me that I was the fifth person within the last 4 years who had taken an interest in looking at this theater. Was it 'cause of money? Asking why nobody had bought it yet. Nodding yes back, I could see how keeping a place like this up and running could be very expensive for one mortal human being. During World War II, Saria and I would always go to the theater and watch whatever played to help pass the time. Before the movies played, there were these war presses that would play before the show, showing us Americans of how we were doing during the war. They would show factories showing how planes were being built, how ships were christened to sail, how everyone, men and women, were doing their part for the war effort. Saria nudged my arm when watching the video of the commentator talking about a steel plant that had produced so much steel, making all sorts of things. Outside after the movie, she told me that we should put our money into steel. Watch the stock rise in profits, saying this from an exciting tone. She was right. The stock paid off very well for us after the war had ended. Using that money, I purchased the theater before the curator could even show me any of the offices, or show me the 3 floors that led up to apartment rooms. This is for me, shaking his hand in excitement of owning something for once in my life, telling the curator. Giving me an odd look back, I told him that this was the first thing in my life that I had ever owned. The curator replied that this would be an expensive theater to maintain. I told him that it would be no problem at all, writing out the check in the amount that the theater was listed for. Shaking hands, never seeing the curator ever again, I think the city was happy for me taking the theater off the bank's hand. 1978, 2 years after the purchase, I had the theater up and running. Bringing it back to the days of vaudeville, I hired whoever wanted to put on a show. The people I had hired never had to worry about shelter. I gave them a free room upstairs in one of the apartments. The next thing I did was by bringing in props from all over the world. Able to do this, I befriended a man who worked at the Seattle docks. The actors that had starred in many of the plays at the theater would always tell their fellow actors of the things they had to leave behind when making the trip to Seattle. One day, walking along the ferry terminals, passing by all the ferries that had pulled back in from the night. One car coming out from the Bremerton ferry, the tire from the front driver's side had popped. Once from getting off the ferry, pulling over to the side, the man was upset clearly. Walking up to him, explaining that I was on my usual nightly walk, I saw his tire pop. I ran over to see if I could assist him in any way. Opening the trunk, he explained that he could not get the tire out due to his arthritis. This was 1978. Arthritis was something I did not know about during this time frame in my life. After changing the tire for him, he was grateful, trying to offer me some money in return. I told him no thank you, giving me an odd look, feeling upset that I refused a handout. I told him that I ran the theater on 4th Street. Ah, that old building is open again, wondering why I had opened it again. I told him I bought the place 2 years ago so I could put on plays for the city. Yeah, I run the docks in Seattle, if you're ever interested in bringing props or stuff from out of state. I did take him up on that offer. He had been a good friend for the 16 years that I had known him. Sadly, in 1992, he had a heart attack on the ferry. The news had said that he was with his grandchildren, ordering some food on the ferry food court before falling from a fatal heart attack, falling to the ground, clutching his chest. Poor guy, saying to myself when seeing the news report this. He had retired some years earlier than when the two of us met. That was all he talked about, talking about his grandchildren. Why don't you have a wife or kids yet? Always asking me. I played the question off each time, as if I were always busy or something. One question that I worried about when he had asked me was a question in 1990. He asked me, how do I still look the same after all these years? My hair never changed. I never grew facial hair. I always wore an outfit as